While the Braves' April slate ranked 30th out of 30 in strength of schedule, things are absolutely heating up here in May. They go from facing the first-place Mets to now hosting the first-place Brewers, but do so with the offense showing some signs of life ahead of this homestand at Truist Park. Welcome into battery-powered Cory McCartney, along with McAuley and Grant. Not to put too much stock into one game, but salvaging a split with the Mets and the way the Braves did it, obviously a welcome sight as they come back to Atlanta.
Yeah, they definitely ended it on a high note. This was not what they wanted from this road trip because ideally you would have liked to have taken 2 out of 3 from a down-and-out Rangers team. And then you had a chance to really make some noise against the Mets. I know that doubleheader sweep was a little bit demoralizing to some, but when the Braves bounced back, less than 24 hours later to get themselves out of town with a split, I think all things considered, you went into New York hoping to not lose ground. You were able to do that. But as we know, all of these games count the same, and 4 more days were torn off the calendar. Well, I guess 3 days were torn off the calendar. 4 games, though, in total that the Braves are not going to get another chance at. They win 2, they lose 2. It's a little bit of, stuck in the position of neutral. However, the way that the Braves won in the finale, I think, was pretty telling. And it was what they needed, number one. They had to find some batted ball luck. That would be a big deal. They also had to string some hits together and look like the offense that I think they're capable of being, and I believe that they feel like they are, but they haven't shown that over the first month. There hasn't been that consistency of getting guys on and then getting big hits, and I mean plural big hits, not just home runs, but being able to do what the Braves have always talked about, whether you go all the way back to Bobby Cox or Freddie Gonzalez or Brian Snitker. It's all about keeping that line moving, and it hasn't moved at the rate that the Braves needed to this year.
Yeah, I mean, 3rd in barrel percentage, 8th in hard hit rate, and 9th in exit velocity, and that's resulted in an NL high for hard hit outs. If you dig into the expected stats, the expected slugging is 93 points higher than the actual slugging percentage. It just felt like that outburst was a long time coming. They did go into that series against the Mets, ranked 29th in terms of producing weighted run created plus runners in scoring position. They go 4 for 9 in that department in that finale. I mean, it just feels big. Obviously, what comes ahead, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, you're facing the best pitching staff in the game in terms of the Brewers in Ks per 9 and Fangraph WAR. Stringing something together, and as you said, moving that line along, I don't know if that could have come at a more opportune time.
No, you wanted to feel like, there was some momentum coming out of that series against the Mets, and that moving forward, you are the team that you believe that you have shown in the past and can be again, or that you are right now, and it's just simply not happening. I know those expected stats, sometimes people look at them and just kind of say, okay, well, that's great. But since it doesn't translate into the actual thing that I want to see, which is wins and hits and runs and all of those things, what does it really matter? Well, I think over the course of the 162 is the case to be made that if they continue to hit at this level, that some of these things should begin to even out. But baseball, it's a game where luck is a big part of it, I believe. I mean, a lot of sports could be, lined up in that regard or looked at through that lens. But I think that the Braves have a better offense and have looked better at times than the results have shown, and especially in terms of the hard hit contact. I mean, I don't know what to make of it. I don't want to spend this whole episode talking about what Major League Baseball did or did not do to its baseballs and the humidors and all of those things. But I've seen all kinds of interesting discussions about that and about how now these expected averages, particularly that ball that Ronald Acuña Jr. scalded to the center field wall that had an expected batting average of 1,000 and was caught on the warning track by Brandon Nimmo with his back against the wall. So something clearly has changed in the last 12 months or so, or less than that, when it comes to this baseball. But again, expected stats are great. I think they can be predictors of what we can expect moving forward in terms of more production. But the Braves have not been able to really, take advantage of a lot of this hard hit contact and be up and near the top as far as runs are concerned. And that ultimately is what's going to help them win baseball games. I think they got the crew to do it. It just hasn't really worked out on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I don't want to go down some diatribe here on why advanced stats matter, but those expected stats in the long term, I think that's why you look at those and why they are important. It's pretty clear that we're really not going to know what this Braves team is truly capable of until Ronald Acuña Jr. is out there on an everyday basis. He's not clear to do so yet. But, I mean, there's been some real signs of showing you that it's going to happen sooner rather than later. He played in 3 of 4 against the Mets. He got himself in a rundown there Wednesday, and maybe the most impressive was that infield hit that came with a 30.5 feet per second time from first to home. He laced that 116.6 mile an hour double, the 4th hardest hit ball of his career. He's in a mere 59 weighted run created plus, hitting 200 with 1 extra base hit. Obviously, the energy, the excitement are all there. I don't know that the identity of this team, though, is really going to come into focus until you can rely on him on an everyday basis. I know Brian Snicker said there's a clear plan and they're going to stick to that plan. But, as we know, Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. I don't know if getting punched in the mouth is where you're at in the standings at 6.5 games back, or it's punched in the mouth and knowing that you have a guy there that's a potential for you to bring in as a late pinch hitter and you don't do it. But Grant, I think you have to look at the fact that you can have a plan with this guy, but I think the way he's bounced back 10 months after that ACL injury, you got to evaluate this on an everyday basis. And I don't know that it's to Acuña's benefit to be doing it quite this way.
No, I would say that this should be a fluid situation and that you should make your determinations based on what you're seeing and the day before, what you're expecting moving forward. Look at the schedule. And I said this on Twitter a few days ago. I don't mind Ronald getting that day off here and there. That's just one of those that's just kind of designed into his schedule to help him get back into the rigors of playing every single day. But I also don't think it hurts to have this guy DHing if you can't put him in right field. And I know that some of this is, I almost feel like sharing the plan and talking about it and then having to change it just creates all this consternation around it to begin with, because there's been 3-4 timetables for when he's going to come back, then what he's going to do. Then you watch what he does in the minor leagues and he's playing right field in the very first one out. It's not like they eased him into a week's worth of DHing in Gwinnett and then, decided, oh, well, now you can play the field. It's not going that slow. I don't know if they wanted to slow play it because it manages expectations of not expecting this kid to put this team on his back and carry him, which I don't think is the worst idea in that regard, because it's going to take more than Ronald Acuña Jr. to help the Braves climb in the standings. And the expectation shouldn't be on this guy to come in. And I've seen the different headlines. Can he save the Braves? Is Ronald Acuña Jr. the savior of the season? That's asking too much. Now, can he come in and be a 7+ win player over the 140 or so games that he gets to play in terms of wins above replacement? Yeah. Can he hit 30 homers? Sure. Can he steal 20, 30 bases? Probably. Can he score 100 runs and knock in another 100? Yeah, he can do all these things, but getting him back up to speed and trying to take some care with him in the early going, and by early going, I mean the first 3, maybe 4 weeks. Once you've played that much time, I feel like other than the occasional day off, what else do you really need to do? What else do you really need to see to know that Ronald Acuña Jr. is back? And the consistency of at-bats is going to be what helps him find his path to being the productive player that he is. And I'm not saying that it's going too slow or too fast. It's almost worse because it's stuck somewhere in the middle. And that, I think, is a little bit confusing at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the hardest part to be is in neutral, right? And if you're not getting him those consistent ABs, how's the guy ever going to find his rhythm again? Right. But a guy who has suddenly found his rhythm is Dansby Swanson, as we kind of continue that signs of life theme. He's hitting 143 back on April 20th, and I know that was an extremely small sample size, but in the last 10 games, he's hitting 344 with a team high 937 OPS. That's all good enough for a top 5 weighted run created plus across the entire National League. The strikeouts are still an issue, but nobody in baseball to this point has struck out more than he has. But hitting below league average in the season, it's all that speaks to a rough start. But when you add in that he's tied for the MLB lead and now it's above average, he's a top 3 Fangraph WAR among all NL shortstops. I think Dansby Swanson, when you look at it of late, he's having a better season than I think a lot of people are probably realizing.
Yeah, and I'm not ready to start talking about, and this is nothing against you or anybody else, like what kind of season is he having, because we haven't seen enough games either of the lows that he started out with or the highs that he's currently going through. I'm one of those that I need to kind of look at that and, get a little bit further in Memorial Days when I start looking at the standings and feeling like, okay, this is giving me a better picture of what is and what could be and what needs to change. I think it's kind of the same for player stats as well, particularly hitters. Once you get that 50, 60 games in, you got at least a third of the season under your belt. I get a little bit better feeling for what level of consistency there has been. It was an awful start for Dansby Swanson. There's no two ways about it. I don't think he would sit there and tell you, oh, yeah, no, I was feeling great. It just wasn't happening. No, there were a ton of strikeouts. He didn't have really anything to speak of in terms of production that was helping the club out. In fact, there were a couple spots in that lineup early on. It was really hurting the Braves. And once you got past the 5th spot in the batting order, and that quite simply was a group effort, but Dansby Swanson was kind of I think he was the guy that was getting the most criticism of that, maybe Adam Duvall right behind him, but he has looked much better over the past 10 days. He's making some more consistent contact in terms of doing something when he's putting the ball in play. He's come up with a couple of big hits for the Braves, and what he's doing at shortstop every day is a net positive for Atlanta. So with Dansby, I think we've learned over the past few years, there's going to be some high tides and some low tides at the plate. but you hope that by the time you look at the end of the season and what you've accomplished, that he's been a contributor to that, and that there's been a few more good days than bad. And I would say he's still got plenty of time to accomplish that.
All right, I will see you're not wanting to get caught up in early stats with what's happening with Charlie Morton, because you have to go back to 2010 to find the last time that he was as bad in the first month of the season as he was in the just completed April. A 7.0 ERA, now at 6.85. It's the second worst of his 15-year career to start a season. We know he's reinvented himself multiple times, weathered more than a few storms, but I'm wondering if it's time to get concerned. Obviously, he's got plenty of time and he's been there, done this. But some of the, I'll dig into this in a moment, but some of the numbers just aren't speaking to a guy that's on the top of his game right now.
No, it's not. And I'm interested to hear what kind of numbers you want to put out there as well, because I know just from the eye test with Charlie alone, clearly he's not getting swings and misses. The numbers do bear that out. He's also being forced into very high pitch counts as he's not really been able to command and again, pinpoint his location to the level that he wants to. And now he's essentially, I feel like, out there kind of working a Rubik's Cube each start to figure out what change he can make right then and there that will start to reverse his fortunes. And that can be a pretty frustrating. I mean, the middle of the diamond is the loneliest place on a baseball field. And he's out there trying to figure that whole thing out. I did like the adjustments that he made in his start against the Mets, where his pitch count was being driven up over the first couple of innings. Yeah, they scored some runs off of him, but then he started to work the problem. He threw more changeups at that point. And that's something he said after the start. Maybe that's something I got to incorporate right now because I need something to help, utilize my fastball and start getting some swings and misses on the curveball. But right now he feels like they're not chasing. And when hitters aren't chasing for a strikeout pitcher with a good fastball like Charlie, but they're just basically eliminating his curveball, that's been a troubling trend. And I don't know that you can put it all on Charlie, or if maybe perhaps just the game plan that these hitters have has been more to their liking and more to their benefit than it has been for him, including the fact and notwithstanding that he has been a little bit off with his command.
Yeah, I go back to 2011. That was the first time he reinvented himself. And then back when he changed his mechanics, and then 2017, he does so and leads to some all-star seasons there with the Astros, really made himself into a strikeout kind of pitcher. The four-seamer this season, in 11.7 whiff rate. That was 23.2 a year ago. The expected slug on that has gone from 392 a year ago to 626. And when you look at the curveball, that was he had a 26.6 weighted curveball runs above average last year. It's a negative pitch for him right now. It's just the stuff that has worked for him so well since that career reinvention in Houston is just failing him right now. The last 5 starts represent the highest ERA he's had over any 5 starts the past 6 seasons. This is the reason why this rotation right now is 23rd in Fangraph WAR. You've got Kyle Wright, who has a 1.74 ERA. You've got Max Fried, a 1.85 in his last 4 starts. Ian Anderson at 2.45 in his past 4. I mean, if Morton is Morton, this is, and I obviously understand there's some issues there with that last spot in this rotation, but this all of a sudden is maybe a top 5 rotation if Morton is pitching like Morton's capable of. They're just not getting it right now, and it's tough to see considering what they're giving those younger arms.
Yeah, no, it is tough to see, particularly with the breakout of Kyle Wright above and beyond everything else that you could ask for with the Braves rotation. There is still a question mark at the end of it, but Max Fried just kind of knocked off the rust and worked around a couple of troublesome innings in his first 2 starts. He's looked like Max Fried this year. I don't have any cause for alarm with him, even if his first couple of outings weren't the exact numbers or line scores that you wanted. Ian Anderson, that's still, I feel for him, a bit of a work in progress. You can get a different Ian every 5th day sometimes when it comes to his command, but more times than not, he has been out there and been able to do at least enough to get it into the middle innings and allow the Braves bullpen a chance to do the rest of the work for him. But with Charlie Morton, and going back to those numbers that you talked about, and I think this is the biggest thing for me, the fact that the curveball is such a non-factor is bad news for his fastball, because no matter where or how hard you throw, major league hitters can hit a fastball, and they will hit a fastball if you don't have anything else to throw up there that entices them to expand their zone. If you can't get something else over for a called strike, if you cannot get them off of that pitch. And I think that at least has been the problem early on, is that his curveball is not a pitch that is tempting hitters, and they're not behind in the count enough to expand their zone. I mean, there's a number of different things I feel like that just haven't worked right for him. But if he fixes the curveball, and I use that, I use that kind of in air quotes, because I don't know that it's altogether broken, but it's not working right now. Once he fixes that, and once that curveball normalizes or moves back towards anything close to his 2021 norms, that is going to have a huge effect, I think, in turning his entire arsenal around, particularly if he can throw that fastball over for strikes and utilize that curveball to put hitters away. That's what he does. That's what the reinvention in 2016, his time with the Astros, it was going to a fastball, curveball pitcher. Yep. That's what he is. The fact he's having to throw changeups to try to muddle his way through 3 innings and get into the 6th, that's a little alarming. And I don't want to see that all season long. If the changeup helps for a little while, that's great. If he's got a plus changeup, even better. I don't know that that's the case, but we'll see what adjustments he's able to make. But that curveball is the pitch that he needs to reclaim, and that is going to help him get himself on track.
I don't want to make a detour here, but I do wonder if that baseball and the inconsistencies with that baseball are having any factor in terms of Charlie Morton being able to get that feel that we're so used to with him on that curve. So the Brewers come to Atlanta for 3 games beginning Friday night, sporting what is the game's second best rotation in Fangraph WAR, an MLB high 10.99 Ks per 9. The Josh Hader-led bullpen is second in WAR, 4th in Ks per 9. Hader has yet to allow a run in 10 appearances with 10 saves. Oh, and the Brewers lineup, by the way, the 5th most runs scored in the overall 3rd most in the National League. Granted, the stakes are not nearly as high as they were in the NLDS, obviously, a year ago. But I think if the Braves are going to build off of what happened in that final game against New York, it starts right now.
It definitely does. I mean, you're back at home. You have put that road trip behind you. You were able to get out of New York with that split. Could it have been better? Yes. Could it have been worse? Yes. You have an off day. Your bullpen is rested up. Your lineup has shown some signs of life. There are a lot of things that you can look at and say, okay, well, now let's see what the next test is going to be. And it's going to be a big one. As you talked about, the Brewers averaging nearly 11 strikeouts per 9 as a pitching staff. Well, the Braves offense is striking out about 10 times per night on average. They're leading Major League Baseball in strikeouts. They're also one of the top home run hitting teams, and that's great, but they got to get some runners on base and, find ways to put crooked numbers up there. And against the Brewers pitching staff, that's going to be a challenge. And then the Braves pitching staff on the other side is going to have to deal with a very capable offense, which has the Brewers as one of the top 3 teams, at least record-wise, in baseball. And that pitching is no joke. We knew about that in the division series last year. The Brewers have, I think, built their success on that, and they've been able to put together an offense that is supporting and giving them a chance to win. That's why they come in at 18-8 and sitting atop the Central. So we'll see what the Braves are able to do with this. It is going to be a big test. No, it's not a playoff series, but I'm sure that the Brewers can look back on that and think, wow, we had so much unfinished business in October, and the Braves came in and bounced us right out before we even got the chance to go on a run with that pitching staff in October. I would imagine that'd be at least a little bit of a motivating factor for the Brewers.
Yeah, so the Brewers are going to run out Eric Lauer, who's coming off of an 11 strikeout game, then Corbin Burns, Aaron Ashby, who has a 10.24 K per 9. I've got my sights on Marcell Ozuna in this one. We talked about bad luck. Marcell is in the top 4 in exit velocity, and the difference between his expected slug and his actual slug is the highest of any Braves hitter. And here's why I like him in this matchup. He has an over 2,000 OPS against Lauer with 3 homers. He's taken Corbin Burns deep twice with an OPS over 1,300. And he's hit 2 home runs off of Josh Hader. And against the entire Brewers staff, he's hitting 349 with an OPS of 1,097. So I think with all those things that we talk about, the expected stats to Marcell Ozuna, I think he could be in for a massive series.
Yeah, he could be. And that would be a sight for sore eyes for Braves fans, because in the middle of that order, it just seems like over the past week or 10 days, his at-bats really haven't been the result of bad luck and just hard-hit balls being caught. He kind of went into a slide. And when that's your cleanup hitter, and they've still been trying to get Ronald at the top established and in there every day. Matt Olson was going through his little slide. Austin Riley has been way more good than bad this year. I don't really have any knocks on him. But Marcell started off hot and seemed to cool off just a little bit. And I don't know, what the rationale is for some of these hard-hit balls not going out of the ballpark. It's just that seems to be a theme that lots of us are going to be talking about throughout the early portion of the season. But to get your cleanup hitter going and against a team that he's had a lot of success against, I'm sure the Brewers weren't upset when he left the Cardinals and went off to the NL East, and they didn't have to face him 19 times a year.
Well, along with facing the Braves, it's also Hank Aaron weekend. Obviously, the 2 teams he played for facing off. So there'll be plenty of tributes all weekend long to the Hall of Famer. As always, we've got you covered here with all things Braves. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you soon, Braves Country.